The soul that sinneth, it's going to die. Now that's the fact. You know, a fact is it's just there, and you can accept or deny it, but it doesn't change the fact. And so chapter 18 deals with not the father's fault, nor it's the son's fault, or not, grandmother's fault, or any of that, or my good friend misled you, all of that. It's the soul that sinneth, it shall die. It's our fault, ourselves. We choose. We choose to make that choice. Moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the princes of Israel. All right, so this chapter is going to deal with the ruling class. All right, the political mess, if you will. This is going to talk about wrong and nationally in high places. When the leader's corrupt, those that follow are corrupt. When the political system is corrupt, the nation is corrupt. Okay? And so this bleeds down like water. Gravity pulls water to the lowest point. This corruption has run down. Good King Josiah has died. A mistake on his part. A mistake. And good men make mistakes. They do. Josiah is called Good King Josiah in the Bible because Josiah was on a mission to turn Israel back to God, and he made a mistake. He misunderstood Pharaoh Necho's journey across his land to fight with the Babylonians, and he misunderstood that and saw Pharaoh Necho as a possible conqueror. So he gathered the armies of Israel, and he went out on the plains of Megiddo, and he met Pharaoh Necho, and he died. He died. But he left three sons, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. All right? And these are going to come up. These are going to come up in order of reign. All right, the reign's going to be in order of their lives. Moreover, take thou up a lamentation. Now we're talking here in that time frame of 609 to 607 BC. We're going to look at 2 Kings after we read this, and what is around Judah at the time is Egypt has come back to be a player in world politics and the vassal nations around Egypt. Okay, with that in mind, understanding the historical setting, and I wished I had an ancient sea book and we'd talk about it, and it'd bore you to death and you'd all go to sleep. And we'd talk about this ancient history where Egypt comes again to power. There's little Judah strutting around like a little bulldog thinking how tough they are, and they're not tough at all. The reason they've been tough is God has blessed young Josiah until he made a mistake. Now here's what the Bible says. What is thy mother? A lioness. All right, so we put Judah in the figure now of a lioness, a mother lion, okay? That's what we've got. I want you to see this through that picture. All right, she couched among lions. In the midst of the young lions, she nourished her whelps. All right, the whelps are the cubs. And she brought up one of her whelps, and he became a young lion. And he learned to catch prey, and he devoured men. The nations also heard of him, and he was taken in their pit. And they brought him with hooks into the land of Egypt. So that's the first line. What happened to the first cub that is brought to power? What happened? He's overcome. He has destroyed the young men of Judah. They've lost in these terrible battles, and he has lost his army. the nations round about. In the picture, how do you catch a lion? Yeah, a trap. So they, in that day and age, they would dig a pit, cover it with some kind of light brush, maybe put some kind of meat in the pit, something like that. And then they would either flush the lion or they'd wait till he'd come smelling that food and he'd fall in the pit. And then once the lion's in the pit, he can't get out. And so they kill him and draw him out with hooks. And so the first lion, that's Jehoahaz. He didn't last very long. He was hostile to Pharaoh Necho, and Pharaoh Necho had already dealt with his dad, so Pharaoh Necho is in no mood to put up with this young king that thinks he's rough and tough and hard to bluff. Okay? So this is a bad deal. And so what Egypt does, take up the challenge of this lion and kill it. So they've removed that. Now, here's what Judah did. Now, when she saw, read Judah, when Judah saw that she had waited and her hope was lost, she thought, oh my. Then she took another of her whelps and made him a young lion. Now, that's Jehoiakim, or in some places in the Kings, it's Jehoiachin. Okay? So, she's brought up another young king. And he went up and down among the lions. He's a real peacock. Okay? He goes up and down among the lions. He became a young lion, and he learned to catch prey and devoured men. And he knew their widows and laid waste their cities. And the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof, because of the noise of his roaring. So when this king, and this is Jehoiakim, he almost destroyed the manpower in Judah. Almost destroyed it all. I'm talking about battle after battle after battle. I tell you what he is. In today's world, he's a punk. And he thinks he's tougher than everybody else. And he goes up there and he gets whipped. And what he has done is create a vast, vast land of widows, and the land's becoming desolate because the battles take a toll on the land. So the second cub, he is no help. He is no help toward the people. He is no help toward God. He is thinking that he is Savior in and of himself, and he can make everything great when, in fact, he cannot. And so what does the lioness do? All right, read Judah. What does the lioness do? Try it again. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results. And it doesn't work like that. And so Judah's doing the same thing in the same way and expecting a different result, and it's not going to come. It's not going to come. So there's an end. Look in 2 Kings with me. Let's just get a little history. We don't have a lot of time, so we have to. It's interesting to read. It's in 2 Kings 23. It's interesting to read some of this, and I'm going to read a good part of this. Let's just read together, because we're going to come into Jehoiakim. And the Bible says in verse 31, 2 Kings, chapter 23, Jehoahaz was 23 years old. That's pretty young, isn't it? All right, so you can see where this youthful arrogance comes from. And he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutah, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, and he did that which evil in the sight of Jehovah, according to all that his fathers had done, and Pharaoh Necho put him in bonds. How long did he reign? Yeah, Pharaoh Necho said, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this. It's like a fly, bothering you all the time, bothering you all the time. And what do you finally do? Yeah, you kill the fly. So this fly has been bothering Pharaoh Necho. Two great powers on the earth at this time. One of them is the Babylonian Empire. The other is Egypt. Egypt will never again shine as the world power as they did in the days of Moses, but they are second, if you will, in power, a formidable power to be dealt with. Okay, so anyway, he's destroyed. That he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to tribute of 100 talents of silver and talents of gold. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. That's why we call him Jehoiakim. Or some translations call it Jehoiachin. But he took Jehoaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. So this 3-month peacock didn't last. And Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money according to the commandment of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and the gold of the people of the land, of every one according to his taxation, to give it unto Pharaoh Necho. And Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years, so that's better than 3 months, isn't it? In Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibadah, the daughter of Pedadiah of Rumah, and he did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah, according to all that his fathers had done. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. See that? Rebelled against him. So that's why you read verse 9, he did that which evil in the sight of Jehovah, according to all that his fathers had done. So you have the next guy, and then in verse 10, and at that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up to Jerusalem, and it was besieged. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar is taking this thing into hand, and so he's brought them into the land of Babylon. And let's go back into this lioness now. Then the nation set him over on every side of province, and they spread their net over him, and he was taken in their pit. And they put him in a cage with hooks and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him to the stronghold, that his voice no more would be heard upon the mountains of Israel. All right, he's gone. He's gone. Now, it changes figures. Now we're not looking at a lioness bringing up her whelps or her cubs and training them. Now we're looking in the agriculture figure. So here we go. We go from the hunting aspect of a lion and raising up cubs, and now we go to the vineyard or to the farm. And now there's a change. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar, we just read about him attacking Jerusalem, just one verse of that. And that was in 597 BC. Now, from 609 to 597, he put up with this, with these three popinjays. You know, he put up with them. But in 597, he put a stop to it. And so his growl, if you would, verse 9, his growl was no longer heard in the land, this young lion. Now he's quiet. Why? Because he's in a cage over in Babylon. That's why his voice is heard or his roar is heard no more on the mountains of Judah, because he's way over here out of hearing in Babylon. Figure changes. Verse 10. Here we go. Thy mother was like a vine. Well, I thought it was a lioness. Well, we changed figures. Was like a vine in thy blood or thy likeness, planted by the waters. And so what happens to a vine when it has plenty of water? Grows good. Anything. We live in a land where the soil is very beneficial if you plant something and it gets water. I remember, what was Marjorie King's? I don't remember. That's what my problem is. What was Marjorie King's husband's name? Bill, wasn't it? Bill King. we first moved here, we'd been here about 3 or 4 months, and the lawn, the church lawn, looked like a gravel pit, and the preacher's home lawn looked worse. And he had, in Garden City, Kansas, he had the finest lawn on that whole section of town. And Judy Ann and I, our family, we lived up, kind of up the hill from him, let's say 5 or 6 houses, and we would drive by his lawn and just marvel. And I asked him, standing right out here, and that was, 1990, 91, whatever it was, and I asked him right out here, I said, how can I fix this mess? It's an eyesore. How can I fix it? You know what he said? He said, water and a bagger. I said, water and a bagger. He said, get a lawnmower with a bagger, get your trash off of this thing, and water this thing to death. And he said, you'll be surprised. And I'll tell you what, Vaden Hayes, in years later, 3 or 4 years later after I gave it up, Vaden did the same thing, moved them hoses all over around everywhere. And I had 2 people stop by one time and tell me they sure was grateful how pretty it looked around the church building that used to be such an eyesore for the community. And what made it so? The application of water and a bagger. Now we've got professional help, Sue and Vaden, and they make it pretty all the time. But I'm talking about 1990, 91, 92, in those years when we were trying to gain victory over grass, burrs, and rocks. And you have to work at it. It has to be watered. That's the point. Now look here. Here's what it says. Planted by the waters, plenty of water. It was fruitful and full of branches by reason of the waters, see? Had good water. And it had strong rods, branches, for the scepters of them that bear rule. So the vine is Judah, and the rods are the ones that bear rule, or the political people. And their stature was exalted among the thick boughs, and they were seen in their height with a multitude of their branches. So what do you have a picture of this vine? Big, pretty, strong, yeah, resilient. Oh, it looks great, doesn't it? That's kind of like the lioness. The lioness is one that actually does the majority of the killing and the hunting and the power is the lioness. An old daddy lion, he is much maligned because he just kind of lays in the shade and waits on to bring him something. And I always thought that was a good thing. but anyway, that's why the Lord dressed him up and he had that pretty collar and mane, so he could lay up on the hill and look pretty, see. But I don't want to get any further into that. At any rate, this vine is beautiful, strong branches. So picture Judah here, all right? Picture Judah. And what you have is prophetic allusion to the past. That's the way it was. That's the way it was. And he's going to do that through chapter 20. It's strong, and its rods were broken off and withered, and the fire consumed them. Fire in the Bible is judgment. Always judgment. And now it's planted in the wilderness in a dry and a thirsty land. Now what has happened to the vine? Huh? It is. It's not doing good at all. It's in the, no water in the desert. And the vine is not doing good. The fire's gone out of the rods. In other words, the power is gone out. The judgment of the rods, the political power, it's gone out of the rods. It has devoured its fruit, so that there is in it no strong rod to be a scepter to the rule. So this vine has consumed itself. It has consumed itself. There's a lamentation, and shall be for lamentation. And so here you have two pictures. The one of the lioness raised up 3 powerful cubs. 2 of them were blithering idiots. All right. The third one is taken away to Babylon. And this is the king that's eyes are put out, saw his sons killed in front of him before his eyes were put out. And so this king is now blind. This king is in captivity in Babylon. So the 3 lions' cubs didn't amount to anything. Did they help the nation? No, they didn't help. Now, here comes the vine. God's saying, this is my vine. I planted it by many waters. It grew up. Ooh, it was pretty. Wow, it was strong. And it, what? Died. Okay, it died. And the fire's gone out, or the judgment, the political power has gone out of its branches, and this thing is consuming itself, and so there's no strong rod to bear the scepter. Remember, Zedekiah or Jehoiachin had been carried away into Babylon, so there's nobody there. What do people do without a leader? Yeah, without a leader, then you have mob rule. Majority plus 1 is a mob. The majority rule thing is a mob. Always has been. So they have no leader. They have no direction. They just have themselves. And so the nation is bankrupt. The nation, remember the silver and the gold and all that stuff, the tribute they had to pay these kings. So the nation has taxed and taxed and taxed and finally bankrupt itself. All right, and now the ruling class has been carried off, either killed or they're in captivity. And so you have the nation in disarray. You have the nation under the thumb of God's judgment. And this is a sad thing. That's why it's called a what? Lamentation. All right, we're on the same page. Isn't this fun material? You ought to have to study it like I've had. I just don't care for this, and it's hard to keep balance. Balance. I've talked to Carol. Matter of fact, I was thanking her Wednesday night. I said, thanks, Carol. You keep me in balance. All of us need balance. All of us need balance. And so here in chapter 19 is the absolute loss of balance. The absolute loss of balance. And so the prosperous nation, it's gone. And what we have now, we got about 7 or 8 minutes. Any question on this section, 18 or 19? 18 is the awareness of, if you sin, you die. Well, if my mama made me do it, no, that's not going to work. No, you're individually responsible toward God, because we are created with individuality. There's not any 2 of us alike. Even twins, identical twins, have certain differences. We are not, we are all, isn't that amazing how that works? You can have children, and they're different. And they're different, Here comes one along, and you just love and love and love them, and they're just as sweet as they can be, and the next one comes along, and it seems like you're cutting switches all the time. You know what I mean? And they're from the same mama and the same daddy. Isn't that right, babe? She used to take Mike out every Sunday, warm the seat of his britches up just about every Sunday. Oh, man, it got to be routine. And there's Ann, and sweet as she could be, no problem. How can 2 people have children that are so different? Well, each one of us are uniquely different. All of us are. There's not any 2 of us alike in this whole wide world. And that shows us, again, individual responsibility. And God says in chapter 18, it's individual. Verse 25, 18, you say that the way of the Lord's not equal? And the Lord says, no. Everyone is responsible. Everyone is responsible. Chapter 19, let me tell you a sad story. The first one's about a lioness. And she did her best. And groomed her cubs and brought them up. 1, 3 months, he's gone. 2, he didn't last very long either. About 11 years. Bang. Number 3, he didn't last very long either. In 597, Nebuchadnezzar come, picked him up, put out his eyes, took him back to Babylon. All right. That's where we are. Sad, sad stories. The vine. I blessed the vine. I watered the vine. I planted you in the right place. And now what have you done? Destroyed yourself. Destroyed yourself. This is a lamentation, and it shall be for a lamentation. And so there's the sad thing. Now look at chapter 20. Here it comes. And it came to pass in the 7th year, in the 5th month, and the 10th day of the month. You think the Bible's specific? This is not a once upon a time there's Goldilocks and the big bad wolf, you know. This is, in fact, a year, month, and day account. All right? Certain of the elders came to inquire of Jehovah and sat before him. And so they're going to come see what's going on here. What in the world are you talking about? Son of man, speak unto the elders and say unto them, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, is it to inquire of me that you've come? They're questioning the preacher. That's what they've come. Is it your place, God says, for you to question my man because of these exclamations that the soul that sinneth it shall die, and that Israel has destroyed itself? Are you really sure you're ground? You really going to come and sit here and question my man? And so here's what he says. As I live, saith the Lord Jehovah, I will not be inquired or investigated by you. Wilt thou judge them, son of man? Wilt thou judge them? Cause them to know the abominations of their fathers? You know, this is Ezekiel preaching the abominations of their fathers. He's been preaching to them about it. And say unto them, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, in the day I chose Israel and sware unto the seed of the house of Jacob, and made myself known unto them in the land of Egypt, when I sware unto them, saying, I am Jehovah your God. In that day I swear unto them to bring them forth out of the land of Egypt into a land that I searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey. So what are we getting here? A review of the history. Do you have the right to question this? Let's just review for a moment. Let's just review for a moment. Is everybody's opinion as good as everybody else's? No. It's not. When I go to the doctor and he gives me his opinion, don't you know that his opinion is far greater than mine? Don't you know that? When you go to a learned professor of history in college, don't you know that his opinion is far greater than yours? Yeah. We took Judy Ann to the doctor Monday, to Dr. Henderson over at Childress. And in my opinion, here's what I thought. Dr. Henderson examined her, and then he said what he thought. And you know what he thought worked out. Can you imagine that? Oh, nobody's coming to Dr. Crowley. You see what I'm saying? So, one opinion is not as good as another. It's not. Now, we've been taught to say that in democracy, but it's not true. Anyone that's taught school, high school, anyone that's taught in a college setting, You know better. You know better. It's not true. I had a nurse tell me that in Idaho. And I made that mistake years ago. I was about 30. No, I wasn't. Yeah, I was about 30. And I said, well, one opinion's good as another. And she said, I beg to differ with you. And I said, really? And she said, don't make statements like that. I said, all right, tell me why. And she said, I'm a nurse. And she'd been a triage nurse in an emergency room, big hospital. And she said, her name was Nell Jensen. And she said, your opinion is not as good as mine in the emergency room. It's not. And she said, in my opinion, regarding biblical matters, is not as good as yours. And she said, you know why? Because we're both studied people. And a studied opinion is always better than opinion that has been offered when they have no background in that arena. And I stood there, looked at that little old lady, and I said, oh, bless me. She's right. She's right. So one opinion is not as good as another because it depends on the background of the one offering the opinion. One offering the opinion. Bill Morrison, that nuclear physicist that was friends of ours in Idaho for years, he goes to Washington, D.C. They talk about hydrogen bombs. They talk about nuclear fuel rods for our nuclear submarines. And he talks about keeping the balance of the protons and neutrons in certain arenas of handling that. Do you think my opinion is as good as his? It'd be ridiculous. I'd be laughed out of the room. So here they come to Ezekiel and say, well, our opinion's good as yours. And God said, baloney. He's going to take them through a history to bring them to the fact that their opinion is not as good as his man, Ezekiel. The word prophet means nabe, from nabe, the mouthpiece for God, the one that speaks for God. And his opinion, their opinion here, is not as good as God's man. And that's what he's going to say in this study. So we'll look at this next week. We're out of time today. But you read this and understand their attack on this prophet. We just don't see it like you do, Ezekiel. Therefore, you don't. So, who has the better background for understanding this? The prophet or these people that have been embroiled in this corruption and been brought as captives into the land? You see, they don't have a good opinion. They're going to express their opinion. And that's why you have the challenge to God. They're going to express this opinion. Oh, I don't think it's all that bad. What are you doing preaching material like the Vine and like the Lions Club? What are you doing trying to depress us? Really, what are you doing that? Remember Jeremiah? Gloom and doom's all he was given to preach. And yet God still required him of it. So Ezekiel's taking on the same mindset that put Jeremiah in the dungeon or in the cistern, if you will. And so read this chapter, get ahead of me a little bit, okay? And then we can come through the background material much, much faster. Appreciate your attention this morning. Thanks for being here.